Well, starting today and then continuing over the coming weeks, we're going to look at these two letters that Paul wrote to the church in Thessalonica. In the past, we've looked at individual sections of the letters, but we've never looked at them in a systematic way as a whole. To discover what Paul says and how he deals with the issues that have arisen in the church in Thessalonica. The issues that are raised are sometimes things that we will have to deal with either now in the immediate future or in the not too distant future. And these letters are thought to be among the earliest documents in the New Testament. Some contend that the first letter to the Thessalonians was the earliest document written in New Testament times. Thessalonica, at the time as it is today, was a seaport. It was the regional hub of Macedonia, and from Thessalonica out into the surrounding regions the gospel reached. At the time, it is thought to have had a population of around 200,000 people, which made it the largest city in Macedonia, or that part of Greece. The background of the letters and the things that Paul deals with lies in Acts chapter 17. And there, if you turn to it, you will find that Paul had visited the city with Silas. After their imprisonment in Philippi, that's where they went to. They went, first of all, to the synagogue and they preached the good news there. They explained the gospel. They took the scriptures and they showed how those scriptures related to Jesus Christ. And the result was, as we're told in Acts, that a number of people who were Jews converted to Christianity or converted to faith in Jesus Christ, along with a large number of God-fearing people, and also, as it is described in Acts, not a few prominent women. Now, that process enraged the leaders of the synagogue, and who recruited then from the town some unsavoury elements, some unsavoury characters, to stir up a wee bit of trouble. And the result was that a riot ensued. They went to the home of a man called Jason, looking for Paul there, and not finding him there, they dragged Jason and a few other believers, who presumably were in the house at the time, up before the city officials. And they charged them with making trouble. Ironically, they charged the Christians with plotting insurrection, of saying that there was another king apart from Caesar, which interestingly is a similar charge to that which Jesus faced. The result of this was that poor Jason ended up in prison, but that night Paul and Silas were smuggled out of town and then moved on to the town of Berea. It was then that the church was birthed in turmoil and suffering. So this is a church that has known persecution from its earlier days, right from the very start. And the upshot of that was that Paul, because he left in a bit of a hurry, was then concerned for the Thessalonians. He was concerned for their spiritual development, their spiritual well-being, and their growth. And this first letter that we begin to look at today was believed to have been written from Corinth. Now, the thing that is striking in the opening chapters is Paul's concern for the church. I mean, that's very obvious. We see that very plainly. And the other thing is the sense that we get of the closeness, the close bond between Paul and the believers in Thessalonica. So the letter begins then in the usual way with Paul's greeting and his prayer of thanksgiving. But the entire structure of the first letter would be useful, I think, for us to keep in mind. It's based around three prayers. This first one that comes right at the beginning, one then that comes in at the end of chapter 3, and one then just as the letter finishes. But between those three letters, Paul deals with, first of all, in the first part of it, between the first prayer and the second prayer, he deals with his concern for the Thessalonians, their response to the gospel, his ministry among them and the effect of that, and the things then that prevented him coming back, which clearly troubled Paul, that he hadn't been able to get back to see the Thessalonians. That resulted in, though he couldn't get back, he sent Timothy back, and Timothy then brought a positive report on the way that the believers had developed and how they'd grown in their faith. The second part then, which comes after between the second prayer and the third prayer, deals with how these believers, or how Paul expected them to live out their faith. It answers then also some of the concerns that they clearly had, usually pertaining or relating to the last things, the return of Christ and the end times. So Paul seeks to answer some of those questions that they have. But as always, it's not so much that the specific situations that occur here relate directly to our situation in the 21st century, or our particular situation in this part of the world. But the principles are there from which I hope we can learn. And we're going to try and apply them to our situation today and see how they may help us to understand our faith better, and maybe to face in a better way some of the things that we will have to face. Now we're going to take a break just at that point. We're going to stop just there and come back to look at this first chapter of 1 Thessalonians in more detail in a minute or two. But one of the things that we will discover is how decisively the gospel has impacted the Thessalonians and their lives. And the difference that that has made to how they go about things and how they live out their lives for Christ. Now, the gospel impact is one that has been described very effectively by Charles Wesley in a hymn that is well known, "And can it be that I should gain an interest in the Saviour's blood?" This song that we're going to sing just now is led by Stuart Townend, and after we've sung that, we'll come back and look then in a little bit more detail at these chapters.